pharynx we can see are here and here. To get a better view, we'll remove the sternocleidomastoid muscle. We'll also remove all the underlying nerves and blood vessels. Here, just in front of the vertebral column, are the longus capitis and longus cervicis muscles. Here, below them, are the scalene muscles. Here's the lower half of the pharynx. The pharynx lies just in front of the longus muscles. To see the whole of the pharynx from behind, we'll remove the vertebral column and all the neck muscles. Here's the pharynx. The pharynx extends from the base of the occiput to the level of the top of the clavicle. The upper part of the pharynx is partly hidden by the digastric muscle, which we'll remove. The upper part of the pharynx is hidden also by the styloid process and the three muscles that descend from it: stylohyoid, which we'll remove, and two other slender muscles which we'll meet shortly: styloglossus and stylopharyngeus. For now, we'll remove them too, along with the styloid process. Now we can finally get a clear view of the whole of the pharynx. Here above the pharynx is the base of the occiput. These are the occipital condyles. Here's the medial pterygoid muscle, sloping downwards from the medial pterygoid plate, which is here. The wall of the pharynx is formed by an almost continuous layer of muscle, lined by mucous membrane. The muscular layer consists of three sheets of muscle, the constrictor muscles, superior, middle, and inferior. These overlap behind, the one above inside the one below. Here's the inferior constrictor. Here's the middle constrictor. Here's the superior constrictor. The superior constrictor is very thin. Its fibers arise from the lower part of the medial pterygoid plate, the hamulus, and the pterygomandibular band, and also from the side of the tongue. The superior constrictor has a free upper border. Above this, the wall of the pharynx is formed by this layer of fascia, the pharyngobasilar fascia. The highest fibers of the superior constrictor insert on the base of the occipital bone. The remaining fibers meet in the midline with the fibers from the opposite side, extending down to here, inside the middle constrictor. Here's the middle constrictor. It's a thicker muscle. The middle constrictor arises from the lesser horn and the greater horn of the hyoid bone. Here's the tip of the greater horn of the hyoid bone. Here's the edge of the lateral thyrohyoid ligament. The fibers of the middle constrictor fan out, meeting with those of the opposite side, from here down to here, inside the inferior constrictor. Here's the upper border of the inferior constrictor. It's thicker again than the middle constrictor. The inferior constrictor arises from just behind the oblique line on the thyroid cartilage, and also from the side of the cricoid cartilage. Its fibers fan out, meeting with the fibers from the other side, all the way from here down to here. The lower end of the inferior constrictor muscle is continuous with the muscular coat of the esophagus. The lowest part of the inferior constrictor, which is functionally separate from the rest of the muscle, is referred to as the cricopharyngeus muscle. It forms a sphincter round the upper end of the esophagus. To complete our picture of the upper part of the pharynx, we'll put the styloid process back, along with two of its three muscles. The longer one is styloglossus, the shorter one is stylopharyngeus. Stylopharyngeus runs down outside the superior constrictor and passes into the wall of the pharynx between the superior and middle constrictors. Styloglossus passes downwards and forwards alongside the superior constrictor and enters the posterior part of the tongue, joining with hyoglossus. To complete our picture of the pharynx, we'll look at a specimen that's been divided in the midline. Looking at the pharynx from the inside will also let us see the muscles of the palate that we left out of the picture in the previous section. Here's the pharynx. Throughout its length, the back wall of the pharynx lies just in front of the vertebral bodies and the longest muscles, with a layer of loose fascia in between that permits movement. The pharynx opens forwards into the nasal cavity, the oral cavity, and the larynx. Up here, it opens laterally into the auditory tube, as we've seen. Down here, it opens downward into the esophagus. The pharynx is often described in three parts: the nasopharynx, which we've looked at already, the oropharynx, and the hypopharynx, also sometimes called the laryngopharynx. The muscles of the palate that we haven't seen yet lie directly beneath the mucosa, which we'll remove. Here's palatoglossus. It arises here from the palatal aponeurosis and passes downwards and forwards to insert on the side of the tongue. Palatoglossus pulls the soft palate downward and forward. Here's palatopharyngeus. It arises partly from the edge of the hard palate, partly from the palatal aponeurosis. Palatopharyngeus passes downwards and backwards to blend with an almost continuous layer of longitudinal muscle that lines the lower part of the pharynx. The lowest fibers of palatopharyngeus insert here on the posterior border of the thyroid cartilage. The palatopharyngeus muscle lies inside the constrictor muscles, hiding them almost completely in this medial view. From here, we see only the upper part of the superior constrictor. We'll take a closer look at it. Here's the upper free border of the superior constrictor muscle. Coming in towards us from above are structures that we met earlier in this tape: the levator palati muscle, the tensor palati muscle, and the cartilage of the auditory tube. Now let's review what we've seen of the oral cavity, the muscles of the cheek and lips, the teeth, the salivary glands, and the pharynx. Here are the gingivae, the hard palate, the soft palate, and the uvula. Here are the palatoglossal arch and the palatopharyngeal arch. Here's the tonsil. Here's the pterygomandibular band, the buccinator muscle, and the orbicularis oris muscle. Here are the teeth, the incisors, the canine, the premolars, and the molars. Here's the crown of the tooth, the root, and the apex. Here's the neck, here's the pulp cavity, here's the apical canal, and the periodontal membrane. Here's the parotid gland and the parotid duct. Here's the submandibular gland and its duct. Here's the sublingual gland. Here's the thyroid cartilage. Here's the cricoid cartilage. Here are the superior constrictor, the middle constrictor, and the inferior constrictor. Here's styloglossus and stylopharyngeus. Here's palatoglossus and palatopharyngeus. That brings us to the end of this long section on the oral cavity and the structures that surround it. In the next section, we'll look at the larynx and its surrounding structures. The larynx controls the passage of air into and out of the trachea. The muscles of the larynx can both open and close the airway. In addition, the muscles of the larynx adjust the length and tension of the vocal folds, leading to the production of voice sounds.